Hello, everybody. We are here back for a very cringy topic once again. So this is week 2. Oh man, I have my own volume on, so let's not do that. We're back with week 2 of this very cringy Bible study, True Woman 101 Divine Design, because there is a part 2 of this, surprisingly. We'll see whether or not we end up going through the second one, because this first one is already so awful. But the first one, last time, we almost finished week 1, and that covered the gender roles. Like, what does the Bible say about gender roles, and why are there gender roles at all? And then week 2 that we're going to primarily focus on tonight talks about the man's role and why does the man have the job that is given to him in the Bible, and what do we do about it? So I can't remember exactly where we left off in week 1, but I know Jordan specifically wanted to make some points about that, and I agree. There are some points that I wanted to spend more time on, which is why we saved it. Do you remember which day of week 1 that was?
Day 3.
It was day 3. Okay, so that's where we left off. So the point that was brought up by Jordan, and I'm gonna let him expand on this, but they make this analogy for why there are different roles, and they say, well, if you look at a forest, there are multiple types of trees, but they're only going to focus on 2 types, and they have pine trees and fir trees. And you wouldn't say that the pine trees are better than the fir trees, or that the fir trees are better than the pine trees. They're both different trees, but they're both equal in their value to the forest. So, Jordan, what are your thoughts on that particular analogy?
So the thing that got me about this is it is so close to getting the point. It's like right there, because like you said, they focus on these 2 trees, and they're like, it would be silly for one tree to say that they're better than another tree, or to, like, you wouldn't want just a fir tree forest or just a whatever the other tree forest, ponderosa pine, I think it was. You'd want a forest with both. And I'm like, but what if there was more than one tree, Mary? What if there was more? Wouldn't an even better variety of trees be even better? It's like, I don't know how that she could, whichever one, Mary, Nancy, could like run right just face first into the point and still miss it.
Right. And so they're almost going towards like a maybe there are more than 2 genders, because again, there are more than 2 types of trees in this forest. But no one is letting these trees, like, no one's saying that the pine trees get to have authority over the fir trees. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly. They say each is green, it's a conifer. The presence brings a depth and color to the forest. A forest with a mix of pine and fir is a different look than, variety is better. And to all that, I'm like, yes, variety is better. Now go like one more step.
Also, in today's episode of Comparing Women to Inanimate Object, trees.
Well, to be fair, I think the men are supposed to be the fir tree in this scenario, because they're because the ponderosa
men do tend to be furrier.
Right, yeah. And I think they focus a lot on the pleasant vanilla smell as opposed to the strong earthy smell of the fir. So I get the impression that the fir tree is supposed to be the male one in this scenario. So
Granny,
I didn't want to breeze past that, because it's yeah.
Earthy. Yeah, I think that's the word that they would probably use for men.
Yeah, Godless Granny, do you have any thoughts on that particular section?
Oh, it's been a long time since I read this over. I got ready for this one, but not that one.
Yeah, we're not going to spend too much time on week 1, but we did want to go back and make that point because we missed it last time.
The one thing that I had on that particular point that I thought was interesting is it said, read Genesis 1:26 to 31 in your Bible, In verse 27, who does it say God created in his own image? And your choices were man, him, and male and female, and I added my own. Serial killers.
Oh yeah. That's brilliant. And we got Karayah joining us today.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. For some reason, my laptop decided to shut down right as I was trying to get everything booted up and ready to go. So that took me an extra 10 minutes.
Oh, you're good. We're just getting into this. We're just kind of recapping last time a little bit. But let's get into week 2. So this was all about the man and what does the man do? And what does the Bible say about men? And I have a lot of thoughts. I was seething with rage when I read this whole chapter. But I think instead of going necessarily day by day, we can end up doing that if people want to, but there's so much to cover in this whole week that I kind of want to make it a bit more free form of a discussion and focus more on the more important points and less on the less important points. So maybe what we'll do is each person we'll start off kind of leading a particular discussion topic from the week, and then we can talk about it, and then once that one's kind of done, we'll each kind of give things that we want to go in a direction of. So
I already got something in my head that just.
Would you like to start? Yeah, you start. Start us off.
What jumped out at me right from the get-go is feminism. What they do is they go ahead and this feminism, what did I write that? Is a dog whistle that you will find in very conservative circles. If it's feminism, it's bad. Everything feminism is bad. And then they basically go ahead and they explain, describe things like equality, and the modern world, but they attach all of that directly to feminism. They're basically able to take something that's just normal and attach it to feminism and make it bad immediately in the minds of their audience.
Yeah, they've done it. They do it with feminism. They do it with words like woke. Basically, they'll pick a label and then they'll just lump anything they don't like under that label.
Yep. It's just simplifying the whole thing. It's just saying all of these things we do not like as feminism. If you liked them previously, you are wrong because it's feminism.
One thing that's changed is communism. When I was a believer, communism was a dirty word, and that was true of a lot of. If you said something and they did, that's communism. Oh, that's communism. Mm-hmm. But now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, suddenly communism isn't quite so bad.
Yep.
Yeah, the Russians are the good guys now. You got to keep up.
That's right. That's right.
It's all about the power.
So what are your thoughts along those lines with bringing up feminism? Because they absolutely do that quite frequently. But they tie in this aspect of culture. But modern culture wants you to believe that men and women are equal and that there's no difference between them. And they're trying to make you less special because they tell you that you're equal. So what kind of examples do you see in this week using culture, and does anything stand out to you with that?
This is an argument that I make every time somebody brings up complementarianism. And they don't use the word directly, but in the introduction they say equality, they insisted, means role interchangeability. If male and female roles are different, then they aren't really equal. And they're arguing against that. And I'm going, duh, Brown versus Board of Education. Did you learn nothing?
Nope.
Separate is inherently unequal.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that down as the very first note too. We went hard in on separate but equal this week, straight in, and
But these are the same people that were fighting for Brown versus Board of Education. They wanted to keep segregation. They wanted to keep so of course they are arguing that separate is equal, because if they had their way, things would still be separate. everything would.
Yeah, they go to great lengths to try to distance themselves from saying that women are lesser than men. So, for example, when when I think it's Nancy writing this section, when she's talking about the different roles and the bents that men and women have, talking about women working, says, don't get me wrong. It's not that women can't work or don't want to work or should never work outside of the home. That's nonsense. And that's not what the Bible teaches. And then she goes on to describe why men are better at working outside the home, why they're naturally inclined to do that, and women are inclined to be or inside the home, right? So it's not that you can't do it, it's that you shouldn't want to because you're not good at it. That's fine, right? That's cool. That's equal.
Yeah.
All right, who wants to go next with the discussion point?
I thought it was funny that toward the end of the introduction they go, so much for Mother Goose. I mean, really, you want to live your life by nursery rhymes? How about ladybug, ladybug, fly away home? Your house is on fire. Your children are burning. Yay.
I mean, of course they do, because they want to live off of a 4,000-year-old laws, like
they want to live in a shoe too, I guess.
And whip their children.
Or stone them.
Yeah.
There was a fair bit of cognitive dissonance, I think, going on, particularly with Nancy, because in week 1, Nancy was talking about how she was a tomboy and trying to defend that being okay while squaring having masculine attributes being bad for a woman in week 1. And then in week 2, she said that as the firstborn of 7 children, I, Nancy, feel a special sense of responsibility to provide a godly example and to exercise influence, right? Which they just spent 4 days talking about how that's the man's job.
Yeah.
Right? like literally this entire chapter is talking about how the things that Nancy says come naturally to her are the man's role, right? And it just shows that, she's trying to hold 2 competing and mutually exclusive things in her mind. She's clearly inclined to be a leader, inclined to take charge, and inclined to do these sort of things that she's saying only men can do, right?
I find this so fascinating because, like, in Proverbs 31, like, she's a businesswoman. She's not just waiting at home for her husband and, like, she takes care of the house, but she, like, there are like specific things where they describe that she goes and she sells things, that she goes and she, so it's like the Proverbs 31 woman has way more agency than fundamental Christians women allow themselves to have.
Yeah. Well, what I've heard in the community and what they would explain it as, though, is that if she has these leadership abilities, which I can understand, I'm also the first, you get into it, you get into that. But she has these leadership abilities, but she's having those to rule over the children in the household and submit to her husband. It's like there was a word for that. It's like a command structure, basically.
Yeah, something with this particular topic. So they go through a bunch of paragraphs talking about the concept of the firstborn and how it's a weird leap. It's a weird leap in their arguments to go from, like, they set all this up, like the Bible talks about the firstborn having these responsibilities and these rights because they're the firstborn. And then they relate that to, well, the Bible says that man was formed first, so now all men are the firstborn. And so since they came first, they get to be in charge just like as if they were the firstborn. But that doesn't make sense, because now half the population is like, I'm going to read this question that they give, and this is on day 4. So it says, read 1 Corinthians 11, 8 through 10 in the margin of the previous page. which I can read that for you. It says, "For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head." And like the verse before that, they talk about Genesis 2:20-22, which talks about that Adam came first. And so they say, what reason does Scripture give for a wife being under the authority of her husband? And literally, the argument they use is that he was made first, and that was it. That's the core of their argument. Like, okay, so he didn't earn it. He didn't earn it at all. He just was made first. That's it.
First come, first served. He should have shown up earlier, Eve, I guess.
I've also heard it. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've also heard it argued that because Eve is the one that was tempted and she sinned first, and Adam was stronger, he didn't sin right away. That's why the man is an authority, because the woman is the weaker one. She's the one that gave in first.
And see, this is why this whole thing is bullshit, though. Because if the man's supposed to be in charge, if you want him to be in charge, you want him to be the strict ruler, well then, by God, it's his responsibility because he's in charge. You can't have it both ways.
Well, they make the argument in the book because, well, they say that the structure was already set up. And this is something that I've heard before in women's Bible studies. And they actually contradict themselves in this book because they simultaneously say, well, all of this stuff is related to the fall, and like women are subservient because of the fall and because they sinned. But then they also say that this power structure was set up before the fall. This was how it was meant to be. But they also talk about the fact that Eve was never told not to eat of the fruit. It was Adam that was told not to. And they're saying that Adam was supposed to have told her, and she was supposed to have listened to Adam. So was she even given the command in the first place, or was that only for Adam? Or how? That's the whole thing is just a contradictory mess, and we all know that. But
and then the other thing is that he was with her. They say that he was with her, and so
with her.
How much of a good leader and how much of a is
he was a coward?
He literally watched this happen. Which, like, you could argue that that's sin as well. Like, that's sin of, like, you know, if I was a parent and I was seeing my kid pick up a knife and, like, was going to be messing with it.
If she dies.
Yeah, I would just be like, well, I don't want to make her mad, or, like, I don't want to, like, I would be like, I got to keep my child alive. Like, if you literally believe that this is going to kill you and or kill her, it's like she's the only other person there and you don't have her back.
Right. I'd say that, just like you were just saying, that is a clear failure of Adam's leadership skills. So if anything, the argument should be Adam had his chance and blew it. So maybe we should give Eve a shot, you know?
No, but she bears children. So she's too emotional and she's not capable of leading, except for children and other women.
Oh my goodness, that sounded so Mormon just now.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I was told since I was little.
Like, no, my okay, so when I got married, my husband was raised Mormon. And it's this thing about but you can bear children and it's so special and so important. And I'm like, yeah, no.
One of the most cringe things I ever heard as a believer was when we were studying Wayne Grudem's Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And the leader looked around the room and said, yeah, I think all of the women here look sufficiently feminine.
Wow.
We had to be feminine enough for him. No judgment of the men, only the women.
Well, and then, like, have you also been on, like, Twitter seeing this, like, thing about how churches have become too feminine?
Oh my God, yes.
Oh, they talk about that here in the book too.
Yeah, okay. Because, like, I just, you know, like, I'm trans, so, like, I'm not saying any diss on trans people with this, but like, the church is literally supposed to be the bride of Christ. So why are they trying to make the bride of Christ a trans man?
Because we're better. Because obviously trans men are really supposed to be the leaders of the household.
Now, I've always understood the bride of Christ, the church, to be feminine. That the church is feminine.
Like literally, like the Greek word that is used there is a feminine rooted word. Like, oh my gosh, I laugh every time I see that because I'm like,
Well, you can. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Okay.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the things that talking about the different roles of masculinity and femininity, the kind of picture that Nancy draws of the things that a man should be doing is so shallow and just vapid, really. Like in day 3, she talks about how how it's good for a man to want to nourish and cherish those for whom he's in a relationship with, which is true. It's also good for anyone to do that. Yeah. Right. They say that, she's talking about how she's grateful for the men and the things that only a man can do, like helping her lift a suitcase into the overhead bin, or house sitting for her, or giving her financial advice, or praying for. None of the thing that all of those things have in common is not a single one requires a dick. Like,
right.
It's just nice things that people can do. There's and there's just a complete non sequitur to go from that, and then therefore it must be a guy who does it. There's just like no connection whatsoever.
Right. I made the point in my notes too about the whole suitcase thing. I was like, well, you've never met like a female weightlifter, bodybuilder or something, because I bet they can lift multiples of those suitcases for you, but you're too busy trying to. I don't know.
Sure.
So weird.
Humans are a mildly sexually dimorphic species, so on average, men are a little bit taller. So on average, a man is perhaps better suited to reach the suitcase bin. But come on, you're gonna hang your entire social structure on.
It's not even that high. It's not even that high of a suitcase thing. Yeah. Like most adults can reach it,
right? By design.
Yeah.
And there are like studies that show that women have a higher pain tolerance than men do.
True.
But the pain tolerance isn't as valuable, you see, because women have it. So, that's, yeah.
I just always find it so funny that it's like, if they hate women so much and they think that God thinks that women are like subpar, why would they choose? Like, why would Yahweh choose to have this savior come through a woman?
Well,
that one
couldn't have it coming
through
a man.
Sorry.
I guess he could have just popped into existence out of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he wouldn't be fully man and fully God.
Yep.
He wasn't supposed to be. Yeah. He wasn't ever. That's a whole nother
thing.
Then
we couldn't have the weird predator story between God and a 14-year-old girl in the book.
Yes.
The biggest thing
Yeah.
The biggest thing I got out of the entire thing was it really took me back to when I was a believer. Mm-hmm. Because I bought into the whole, you're supposed to be submissive and, this is what pleases God. And I could see how I got sucked into that. And it is no mistake that they put the man first. And Ben, you kind of touched on this at the beginning, that the whole reason that this works and they're able to convince women to give up their autonomy is because first they convince them that you can do that because you've got a man protecting you. You've got a man looking over you. You've got a man that has your best interests in heart. And isn't it great to submit to someone who is thinking of you first and foremost? And it works. It really works.
Right. It's interesting, though. I mean, with the whole timeline as well, because you look at the creation story, which I say story when it should be stories, because there are two completely different stories in Genesis. But we're not going to focus too hard on the contradictions in Genesis. But like they have this whole progression of going from more chaotic to less chaotic, and like lesser beings to like more prized beings. But if you're following that order, then why was the woman made? If the woman was made last, doesn't that make her the apex of all creation? That is what all of creation led towards, was the creation of woman and not the creation of man. But that doesn't fit the narrative that they want to tell. But
there's like things that like now that I am out of the church that I'm like looking at and I'm going, how, like, they obviously had a very specific thing that they were wanting to tell, because that's not how people are. And like a really good example of that is Lot's daughters. Because, you know, here you have these violent men who have surrounded their house and are trying to like break in, and Lot offers his daughters, right? And they're having to flee the city, and they lose their mom after they have just had sexual violence be threatened on them, and very horrified violence. And so these young, naive teenage girls then turn around and they sexually assault their father. Is that really, like, do you really think that's how that would go down? That it wouldn't have just been their dad being like, well, there's no other men, and...
You mean no other women? So I'm going to take them?
Oh, no, like, there's no other men for the
family.
Like, okay, gotcha.
His family line would die out. Like, you know, like for me now, it's so much more realistic that he assaulted them than they would have gotten him drunk and assaulted him after what they have been through. But that makes women look more sympathetic.
But also, can you imagine him at his age trying to get one up after being so belligerently drunk that he cannot understand that he's doing his daughters?
Well, that's one thing. That's a question that I have. Is it physically possible for a man to have an erection and not realize it? I'm guessing the answer is yes. Oh, okay.
It is possible to have
well,
one,
he was
not
only
realizing it, but not when he's that drunk.
He's supposed to be passed out.
Ben, you could opine on the medical realities here if you'd like.
I don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
About whether or not they would know if they had one, or the likelihood of having one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Here's my experience personally.
No.
I've never seen it hard when he was drunk.
Okay.
But passed out, yes, depending on the dream he was having. But not drunk passed out.
That's kind of what I was thinking. You know, I have heard of it during a dream, so I was wondering if maybe that's what it was.
I've seen that, just middle of the night, turning over. Oh, somebody happy.
So I do want to talk about a couple of topics in these chapters, because they were very big points. So on day 3, the entry is called "Wearing the Pants," and it talks about who wears the pants, and only one person can wear the pants, apparently. So do you all have any thoughts about this particular section and the concept of wearing the pants?
Well, it's well known that if 2 people in a room are wearing pants, they have to immediately fight for dominance, right? Like that's how it works.
Fight to the death.
Yeah.
Got a Rochambeau.
Yeah.
Draw your swords.
So I think I mentioned this last time. I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, and I am not a fundamentalist Christian, but I'm still in a heterosexual committed relationship that's not that much different, like from zoomed out from where I was before. But the idea that before I had to be the sole person who was in charge, I had to make all the decisions, everything fell on me, right? That's not awesome. Like, obviously, this entire schema is far more damaging to women than men, but men lose too. Nobody wins. Like, it's to nobody's benefit. Now I'm in a relationship with someone where we're equal partners, you know, and it's awesome because I have somebody else that I can rely on sometimes, you know, like that. There's we've never once has it come up who wears the pants. Like, it's not a thing that you need to hash out, I guess is what I'm saying.
That is something that I struggle so hard with and cannot get through to my husband. That I don't need him to be responsible for me. Even simple things like when we're going for a walk, he's steering me, and I ask him to knock it off, and he might for the rest of the walk, but then he forgets and starts doing it again the next time. It's really annoying when you're stepping over some goose poop and he decides you should go around it and starts pulling you. You kind of lose your balance. I can walk all by myself. I don't need you to steer me.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm
how would you know where to walk? How would you know if he wasn't there? Like,
Well,
it's a good thing he's there. You might like run into a tree.
that's right. But what's really annoying is when I want to do something big, if he doesn't want to do it, he'll say, no, I don't want to do that. And I'll say, well, that's fine. You don't have to. I'll do it myself. Well, no. I'll do it with you. You don't have to be responsible for me. I could do things all by myself.
Yeah, the way I was raised, I had to be the one responsible when I was growing up. And I never really enjoyed the responsibility that much. It's like, and to this day, 2007, we had a vacation. My mother was not making decisions fast enough for me, and I made the decision and we did something. Does not work that way.
I probably make more decisions in my relationship than my wife does, only because my wife is like an uber planner. Like, she gets paralyzed by choice. If you ever buy like a bowl, she'll spend a week researching the platonic ideal of a bowl.
I have ADHD that comes with indecision panic, so I can relate.
Yeah. But yeah, the patriarchy harms us all.
Agreed.
Definitely. Granny, did you want to go into a discussion point that you had?
You mean for day 3?
Oh, just for any section, anything that you want to talk about from this chapter.
Okay. The biggest thing I wanted to talk about was what I mentioned already, was that, the whole thing it just brought back memories and of how I ended up where I ended up. I nearly destroyed myself. And that was because my mindset was, my husband is the only one that matters. I do not matter. I have no thoughts. I have no opinions. Only his matter. Now, he never said that. He would never have gone that far. But to me, these kinds of Bible studies convinced me that that's what God expected of me and that's what God wanted of me. And I've told this story before, so you may have already heard it, but one of the most bizarre light bulb moments for me as an atheist was the first time I went grocery shopping and I stood in front of the cookies and I said, what do I want? And I've never asked myself that before. What do I want? And it's really weird starting to think about my own desires.
Yeah, it has, this particular brand of Christianity has a real knack of taking things that in certain doses are fine, or even laudable and good, and turning them up to 11 to where they're bad. So like putting other people first and thinking of other people is a great thing. You should do that. That's awesome. But then doing it to the point where you never ever think of yourself, that's bad,
Yeah. It was always interesting to me when I was a Christian, when I would like talk with people about, the commandment of to love your neighbor. And I would sometimes, just to like see, I would go like, love your neighbor better than yourself. And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, that's not what it says. It's as yourself. And that always like you could see when they were like, what?
I think what we were looking for from you, Godless Granny, is I was very interested in your thoughts on day 5 with a chapter about manning up.
Let's see.
I think that was the chapter where they quote John Piper.
Yep, 62.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was a page short. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of an expert on John Piper. And the reason I'm kind of an expert on John Piper is because the pastor at one of the churches that I went to practically worshiped Piper. If he was going to be out of town on vacation, he didn't trust his pulpit to anyone. We watched a Piper video. And I was the church librarian. So I went to book conferences every year. And the first thing I always looked for was Piper's books because I knew, my pastor would want those in the library. And so I read a lot of Piper's books as well. And Piper is a pseudo-intellectual, which is why he is so appealing. He sounds like he's really intelligent. And the pastor also pushed some of the other more intelligent of the modern theologians like Keller and Knoll. And let's see, the quote here, Piper says, confusion over the meaning of sexual personhood today is epidemic. The consequence of this confusion is not a free and happy harmony among gender-free persons relating on the basis of abstract competencies. The consequence, rather, is more divorce, more homosexuality, more sexual abuse, more promiscuity, more social awkwardness, and more emotional distress and suicide that come with the loss of God-given identity. And I'm thinking that is rich coming from a who claims that God is in control of absolutely everything. I sent Ben a link to an article where Piper gave an interview and he said this, and the reporter asked him, so does that mean if a woman is raped that God ordained the rape? And he said, yes. Now it was a qualified yes. It's the usual Christian. In the grand scheme of things, somehow God would use this to his glory because God's glory is the only thing that matters. Humans don't matter. But yeah, there's the article. Don't blame the rapist. The rape was God's idea, and Piper is absolutely. So why is he upset about the consequences of culture? Because God is in control of everything. If there's more sexual abuse, it's because God wants it that way.
So
if
does
there's
Piper,
more promise,
does Piper believe in free will?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
He's a Calvinist, total predestination. But the other thing that Piper said that is, really rich in here, more abuse, and yet Piper says that women are supposed to endure abuse. I sent Ben a link to a video where Piper specifically says this. Are you bringing it up?
Yeah,
Go about a little better than halfway into the video, because he starts the video by talking about how, well, there's different kinds of abuse. If a man is abusing his wife spiritually, she should not take that. If a man is asking a wife to do something that God tells her not to do, she absolutely should not do that. Yeah, here's the video.
Oh my God, that video.
Yeah.
Acts, willingly, group sex, or something really weird, bizarre, harmful, that clearly would be sin. Then the way she submits, and I really think this is possible, it's kind of paradoxical. He's not going to go there. I'm saying, no, she's not going to do what Jesus would disapprove, even though the husband is asking her to do it. She's going to say, however, something like, honey, I want so much to follow you as my leader. God calls me to do that, and I would love to do that. It would be sweet to me if I could enjoy your leadership. And so then she would say, but if you ask me to do this, require this of me, then I can't go there. Now that's one kind of situation. Just a word on the other kind. If it's not requiring her to sin, but simply hurting her, then I think she endures verbal abuse for a season, and she endures perhaps being smacked one night, and then she seeks help from the church.
Yeah.
Deal with somebody in this.
Seeks help from the church,
solution,
not from law enforcement.
Exactly.
The
this
church
man should be disciplined.
is going to
This man should be
support
disciplined.
the
She should
man.
have a safe place
Exactly.
in the body of Christ where she goes, and then the people in the church deal with him. She can't deal with him by herself.
Yeah.
So the short answer,
I would hear that too, where like
the church
sometimes my
is
mom
really
or my
crucial
mom's friends
to
would talk
step in.
about someone's husband slapping them across the face, and it was like, and they didn't get a divorce, and she was like, no, you don't divorce someone because they slap you. And I'm like, what? They're like, that's a moment of weakness. No, the fuck it is. Like, what?
But isn't it the man's job to love and care for his spouse?
Well, depending on who you ask, it's also his job to discipline her.
Yeah.
How dark do you want to go?
That rabbit hole.
And we've already gone. We've already gone.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've
I
been.
think we're. I already knew this was going to be a limited monetization stream. But
The answer to your question is yes, you stay with him no matter what.
Yeah.
And the way that you convince yourself that it's right is he becomes oblivious to you. Because you don't matter, he stops seeing you as mattering. And here's what happened to me. I don't talk about this a lot because one of my kids doesn't even know about this. But I went through a period that I call the dark years. It started with him doing something sexually that I did not like, and it hurt. And I told him to please stop. And he would for about 5 minutes. And then when he did it again, I would go, you know, if he's enjoying himself that much, I should just let him. And then it escalated, and it escalated, and it escalated. And when I finally couldn't take it anymore, and I broke down, he was just like, I don't get it. And I said, how did you not notice that I've been crying when you're finished? He said, yeah, I didn't notice. And I said, how did you not notice when I would say no and you insist? And so I say, okay, then hurry up and get it over with. How do you not get that is not enthusiastic consent? I didn't use those words because I didn't even have those words yet. If you listen to some of the people that I talked to in my early years of disbelief, they will tell you that, you know, when somebody brought up the idea that it's okay to withdraw consent after you say yes, and I was just absolutely shocked. You can? That's okay. You know, because I don't know. I always thought that was disrespectful to a man. But yeah, and I went through that for about 10 years. Now, I'm still married to him, but we don't have sex. We have an asexual relationship.
I have no words for that. That is absolutely horrible. And the fact that, like, people can look at this on the surface and think that, oh, well, they're practicing this religion. This is what they believe to be true, so it's fine. We'll just live and let live. But this is the harm that's being done. People don't know that this is harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they smuggle in so much of this that people just, they don't know anything else.
The lack of education, the ignorance it fosters, the victim mentality that it encourages, both on not giving you the words and the knowledge needed to defend yourself, but also not giving you the safe place to do something about it. Like this is the kind of harm that this strain of religion does, even to those who are, willing participants. It's yeah. Yeah, and I think this is why deconstructing this kind of thing, even though we're making fun of this Bible study and having a good time, it's serious because it has demonstrable harm for real people.
Yeah,
real people are harmed by this kind of mentality.
Because it's not just that; it's that, so the Bible says that, spouses own each other's bodies. So, the Bible was written at a time when women were not seen as fully human.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're reading is women who are willingly saying, I choose to be less than human. And I choose to have someone who, even with what you were saying of him saying that he stopped seeing you. I mean, I don't know enough about your situation, but there's also a reality that he never saw. Because growing up in that environment, he's conditioned to, men are conditioned to see women as less than, and to not consider that they have needs and thoughts and feelings. I remember seeing this conservative talk show where one guy admitted that it took him 10 years to realize that his wife had thoughts and feelings. 10 years. He had children with her and everything.
Yeah, I mean, going along with this exact topic, there's a section called "It's Off to Work We Go," and then that's kind of linked with the Provide and Protect section in day 2 in the Men at Work. I guess we can cover a little bit of the context of this day, but they talk about the consequences of sin for men, and how in Genesis 2:5-7 they say that sin made man's work much more difficult. And then Genesis 2:15 said that God sent the man out of the garden to work the field. Genesis 3:17-19, God created man from dust of the ground. He would one day work. Genesis 3:23, God assigned the man to work the garden. So they're trying to say that men are more prepared to work, and that the responsibility is going to go to men because men have a harder job. They were assigned to work, and so they actually get the worst end of the deal than women, because women just have to obey, and that's not as hard as working the field. But then we go into the next section as well, and so they use that to justify in Genesis 2:15, and they even have you write down parts of this verse. So they have little spaces for you to fill in the verbs. God commanded the man to work the garden and keep it. And they're trying to emphasize this word keep. And the next question says, look up the word keep in the thesaurus. In the space below, list the words you can think that most closely relate to what God expected the man to do. And if you look up the word keep in a thesaurus, you find some nice flowery language, but you also find things like grip, detain, possess, and control. So taking into account all of the words that you see in the thesaurus, because of course many of the women that go through this Bible study might only focus on the good things, because they're primed to think, I'm going through this Bible study that I'm supposed to go through. Men are great. I'm going to honor my husband. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and think these other words. But in saying that, we're going to fixate on this word keep. We are smuggling in now possess and control, and it's very blatantly that they're allowing this to be present. So and then later on, right after that question about keep, they talk about how keep is like to be in charge of. So they greatly tone this down a little bit to make it seem not so bad. But then the next question right after is, can you think of an instance in which a male family member or friend exemplified this trait? And this is all very, very disgusting. And I want to hear all of your thoughts on how this passage, like this whole section, sets up problems.
I mean, this is what happens when you base your sexual ethic on a society from 4,000 years ago. Like,
well, one thing, they didn't do their homework because they mixed up two of the verses. You know, they claim Genesis 2:15, God sent the man out of the garden to work. No, that's where God put the man in the garden to work.
Actually,
and then it says Genesis 3:23, God assigned the man to work the garden. No, that's when God kicked them out of the garden.
Granny?
Hmm?
There's a task assigned for that one. Draw lines matching the reference in the left column to its matching summary statement on the right.
Okay, I missed that. Sorry. Okay. One other thing in the introduction to this, you know, she talks about those signs that say men at work and men working. I still see those where I live. And I said something about that quite recently. We were driving and, you know, there was some utility work going on and there was a big sign up, men working. And I said, you know, not everyone in that crew was male. And my husband, I was really surprised. My son too was, oh, Mom, you know, it just means people, you know, forget it. So what if it says men? Yeah, I've got a problem with that.
why don't we just make a sign that says women working then? Would that be cool? I mean,
Right.
like,
Well, they talk about that in here. They talk about how somebody vandalized the sign that said to put the WO in front of it, and they said that was bad.
Suddenly it's not okay. Oh, so representation is not okay now, you know.
But because the men at work do not want to be identified as women.
Right.
Drastically.
Well, and because women aren't supposed to be working like that. Women are supposed to be at home.
That wouldn't be a problem if they knew their place.
I always find that crazy because it just shows how, like, okay, granted, I don't have kids. I'm not a mom. But taking care of, like, you know, like, especially like if you're a first-time mom and you're taking care of a newborn and you're dealing with the lack of sleep and having to still like cook for your husband and like function as a human being, like that's incredibly hard work.
Yeah,
that's tremendously hard. Like, what the
and you don't, and we were talking before the stream, you don't get sick days. You don't get days off. If your kids are sick and you're sick, too bad. You're still their parent. Someone's still got to take care of those kids even when you're sick. So,
and
like,
I mean,
maybe it's harder than you going to your 9-to-5 job and then coming home and then sitting on the couch.
I did not birth it, but I took a baby home, a newborn, and yes, I cannot imagine what it would be like to go through all of that, plus trying to heal from birth, which is highly traumatic, and then it's just not feasible, at least not in a healthy way.
One thing that jumped out to me, Ben, was in I think it was day one, towards the end of day one. They're talking about God fashioning man and woman in the Genesis story, and the part that I have highlighted is more amazing yet. God didn't just take a personal interest over the creation of Adam; He oversees the creation of every human being, each one with his or her distinctive appearance, DNA, personality, natural abilities, etc. Does that include my trans friends who they say are not okay, or like my homosexual friends? Did he make those too, or did those not count? Like, did he not make those traits? So those slip through the cracks?
No, we just want to sin. It's just rebelling.
Right. So he didn't make. So when he paid attention to every detail. Not those details, though. Those were you.
What about genetic disorders?
Well, the fall and
but is God not
See,
in
God's
control of those
God.
aspects?
God can do whatever He wants. God works in mysterious ways, and just for some reason He didn't want to, and He wanted somebody to learn from this. That's what it all is. And I feel so gross just saying that, but that's the argument that people give. Like, we don't know why these people are different, but it's so great that and the worst thing too is when somebody is like, especially I see this with people who are who have kids who are neurodivergent, or who have kids with physical disabilities, and they say, well, it's so great of you, and you're so brave for parenting this kid. Like, okay, you did the bare minimum of not like abandoning your child who is a human being. Well, like, you're what?
Okay.
What I heard about that when it comes to genetic differences, etc., was that the fall caused everything to slowly break down, and after the flood, it basically went to pot. If you look at the ages that everybody had, all the way up until the flood, that would be the explanation for that. Is that everything was slowly deteriorating, but the conditions were still good, in a way that it wasn't as bad. But then after the flood, everything gets cut off, and the life expectancy drops under 100.
So the flood was so God made people, and it got messed up. So it was like, this is too bad. I have to wipe them all out because they're too far gone now. So then it wipes them all out, and now it gets even worse. So God's methods of trying to fix the world are just making it more garbage. What was the whole point of the flood then, if you just made it worse?
There's a really good word for that in German. It's called verschlimmbessern. That's when you try to fix something and make it worse in the process.
And I, for one, am shocked that mass genocide didn't improve the situation.
Right, and that's a point, actually, like, going into the whole genocide topic, because there's a section that I wrote something about this, and it's the King of the Castle section for day 5, I think. So read Mark 10:35 through 45. In the space below, summarize Christ's perspective on how a person in authority should and should not view his or her position. So they go on this whole essay about, like, but if you're given authority, it's not just the right to do whatever you want. Like, you have to do the right thing for the people around you. And then they're like, look to Christ's example. All right, so if God and Christ are the same person, God's answer to his authority is genocide of a lot of people groups. So apparently that's how people in authority should act, is commit genocide. And then there's another question here that's, what do you think it would be like to be under the authority of someone who loved and served you as Jesus loves and serves the church? And so I wrote, what is it like to live under someone that commits mass genocide? Because they're the same person. A great example for all of us.
That was the old covenant.
To live under someone who will torture you if you don't do what he wants you to do.
Yeah, it's the old covenant, because
that's definitely a new one, though.
Because God's objective morality is constant throughout all of time and never changes. Oh, no, but the genocide was then. That's not now. It's not okay to do that now. So your morality changed?
So I will say, though, in fairness, I prefer that answer, because I can see, like, okay, you recognize genocide as bad, and so you're trying to rationalize these things. I can understand why you're there, right? What I can't understand is genocide's fine. Like, what? It's okay if God commits genocide. At that point, I'm like, all right, this is not a conversation I'm having. Like,
that's when that's when I've had to step away from conversations with my dad, where he'll be like, being like, well, God created everything, so, like, we don't get to judge. And it's like, what?
I created my kids. It doesn't mean I can throw them in a lake whenever I want. Not that I want to do that, but I'm just saying, like, this is recognized as a thing you can't do to sentient beings,
Yeah, but that's a human example. Our human minds just can't possibly. Yeah, I hate that shit. I hate it so much.
But the biggest issue with that is there's something that I noticed at the beginning of my deconversion, is that it's not only the genocide in the past where people were just killed and they'd be dead. If you look into the New Testament, it'll basically tell you, at least the modern interpretation of the New Testament will tell you that if you're not on the right side, if you don't get right with God, you will be tortured forever and it'll be right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was told by people that they would be happy to see me in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and which is just gross. I'm anecdotally seeing we're a bit afield of the women Bible study now, but I'm seeing a kind of increase in popularity in annihilationism as the solution, which is better at least than eternal conscious torment. Like, it doesn't make any sense. My grandmother was a devout Christian all her life, went to her grave Christian. So if Christianity is true, she's in heaven, and when I die, I'm going to go to hell. If I'm being tortured, there's no way my grandmother is going to be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's either my grandmother's going to be miserable knowing that her children and grandchildren are burning in hell, or that's not my grandmother. Like,
well, because they believe that God will wipe their memories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you aren't you without your memories,
right?
So, like, you're just this, like, soulless void that, like, why does that appeal to people where they're like, yeah, that means that, like, I won't, after I die, I get to, like,
that's like
lose all my, autonomy. Like,
it's like some Return of the Elder Gods shit right there. Like,
I want to know how many bodies you get, because if you die and you immediately go to heaven, where you get a new body where it's perfect. Okay, so now you have a physical body that's in the grave and you have a new body in heaven. Then when the final days come and everyone is resurrected, you get another new body. I mean, how many bodies do we need?
it's like iPhones. You got to keep up with the latest version.
You get 3 bodies because symbolism, because Jesus Christ rose after three days, but it wasn't actually 3 days because people can't count days. But 3 days, and the Trinity, like, it's 3, so 3 bodies for everybody.
Well, actually, at the resurrection, he's supposed to resurrect the physical body that got buried, and you get that one back. But now it gets perfected.
How
do they brain transplant back? Like, how does this
I don't know. I don't know how it works.
Don't worry about it.
If I had something removed of my body, like I had a surgery when I was a child, I had something removed that was there. Is that going to be replaced?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes. Everyone who had their gallbladder removed is getting their gallbladder back.
So they get all my polyps back.
A perfect gallbladder. Yeah.
And if you were cremated, God will put it back together again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I follow someone on Twitter. His name is Cortland, and yesterday he tweeted out, Christians will tell you it's a sin to be gay, and then go on to describe heaven as the most extravagant and colorful eternal musical of all times. Hate to break it to you guys, but heaven sounds pretty gay to me.
Nice.
Yeah. I went a completely different route than you did on this, Ben, because I was thinking in the mindset that they want you to, that you're supposed to be thinking of Jesus and not of the Old Testament. But just looking at Jesus, what did Jesus do after his resurrection? He abandoned the church. Nobody has seen or heard from him in 2,000 years.
No, he just went to get cigarettes and milk. He'll be back. in a few thousand years.
Dude,
Like,
he's been edging us for 2,000 years. The
hey,
ultimate
Jesus is the
edgelord.
ultimate dad. Like, tell me, like, there's so much commonality between Jesus and a lot of people's dads, unfortunately. So
I
Jesus
didn't
is your
realize
average
how
absentee
godly my
father.
father has been this whole time.
Jesus,
He's just been doing what Jesus would do, man.
yeah, Jesus is also like my dad because he's dead to me.
Ooh. Damn.
What other points do we have that we want to go over? We've got probably like a half hour max, and then we'll wrap it up. So we'll kind of make it free form discussion for whatever people want to.
I don't know. It
address
felt
this.
this one felt even more repetitive than last week.
Yeah.
Basically, the first day pretty much said everything that you needed to say. Separate to be equal. That men are better suited for the tasks that are valued higher by our society, and what a coincidence that is. Yeah, you really don't need to go any further than that.
The one other point I would bring up is that by saying that the leadership roles are reserved for men is to deny women a seat at the table. And this is not only damaging to women, but it's damaging to men too. Because not only does it deprive women of the opportunity to exercise any talents and abilities they have, it deprives men of being able to benefit from those talents and abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've cut off half your labor pool for any arbitrary number of jobs.
Here's something that happened to me once, just anecdotal. So I'm covering my hair. I'm wearing a long skirt. I'm doing it very much to a T. I'm doing everything right. We have a meeting. We need to take down the tables. I grab a table, it's one of those big round ones, and I roll it out, and I grab a stack of chairs and push that out and carry that out. And afterwards, one of the older women pulls me to the side and says, you need to stop doing that. Doing what? You're embarrassing the men.
Yeah, they have to show off by carrying all the chairs.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's this guy, his name is Stephen Wolfe, and he wrote this book about it's like the case for Christian nationalism. And he was saying in an interview how that men can't be in charge because they're too empathetic and inclusive. And that, like, under Christian nationalism, blasphemy would be punished and atheism would be crushed, and that women wouldn't be able to handle that. And my friend Andrew Seidel, he said, we can't have a Christian nation with women in leadership positions because women are empathetic and inclusive. They're not hiding the goal of Christian nationalism. The white conservative white Christian men will be a special favored class. Everyone else lesser.
Yeah, these men that show no emotion and are completely logical, that are running around on the internet, wanting to know about everybody's genitals and whether or not that makes them fit for a certain bathroom and or places in government and things, and definitely no emotion at all.
Somebody
Not
needs to tell
emotional.
these men that anger is an emotion.
Right. And something that gets me with this whole conversation about like women in charge, and this is something that like, because my experience, I'll tell a little bit of my story, because I started deconstructing this part of Christianity, and that kind of really helped me spiral out of the religion entirely. But I was in India. I was on a mission trip to India, and we had a challenge to read like all of the New Testament, and then like I finished very quickly because I was very enthusiastic, so I started reading the Old Testament, and great. You start having a lot of questions, because you're like, what? And I'd read it before, but like never as an adult. So like I didn't process what I was reading until I was an adult. I was like, this is something different. All right. And then basically like I was in a crisis, an absolute crisis, because I knew I could not be the woman that I was supposed to be. And granted, like I had read Proverbs 31, which like is you have a businesswoman, but it's not framed that way in the church. And so like they focus on these staying at home things, like being a good parent and stuff, parts of it. And it was like, I can't be this person. I'm applying to medical school. Like I cannot, no matter what, be the woman that they want me to be. And I was in an identity crisis. And then I had questions that I kept trying to ask people. I was like, but you read the book of Judges, and Deborah is a great character, and she was arguably probably the best leader of Israel they had, like for a long time. The only woman at that time to be a judge. And so I was like, so if men are the ones that are meant to lead, then how come, number one, Deborah was in charge, and number two, she did such a good job at it? And then the overwhelming responses I got were no, but she was the exception, and she was a punishment because the Israelites weren't doing what they're supposed to, and so they put a woman in charge to show them that they shouldn't do that again. Like, but she did a better job than the men. But then also like the argument of they put a woman in charge because there wasn't it was an exception because there wasn't another man that could do it. Like, there was no other man in the entirety of the civilization, no men at all that could have been chosen. And God, the omnipotent creator, couldn't make a man to fill that role. If that was a role that only a man could fill and only a man could do it well, what do you do with that example? Like, that breaks your entire argument.
So that means that when a woman is the best qualified person for a job, she should have that job, even if there's men around. That's what I'm getting.
That's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says.
But from the explanation that was given in conjunction with that Bible passage, you could think that if God wants to humiliate men, he puts a woman in charge.
Well, yeah, because she'll probably do a better job than like a lot of the men. Like, not saying that like all men are inferior. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I was saying that like,
yeah, no,
the average person in general, most people, not most men, not most people are not good at leadership. That's just like a lot of people are not good at that. And so yeah, the majority of men are not good at leadership. Just because a majority of people, the majority of women are also not good at leadership because just people suck at leadership. But when you compare the people who are good, that are either men or women or non-binary people, then it doesn't really matter what's in your pants or what your gender identity is, because it's who's the most qualified for the job, who can step up to the plate and do what needs to be done. Doesn't need to be a comparison. The fact that these books frame it to where you need to have the comparison, again, going back to the separate but equal, there's no reason to have this comparison. And looking at sociology, like, and they like to frame it in this book as, well, but why do you think God separated these out? Why do you think there's a difference? The only difference is somebody wrote a book and society saw that, wow, people have different anatomy, and we are people of groups. We like categories. And so in order for my brain to process the information I have, I need to organize it in some way that simplifies it, because areas of gray are difficult to process. I can't make interpretations of the world as easily with areas of gray. So I'm going to separate people out into categories, and then I'm going to put them in a hierarchy. And in order to put people that are different into this structure, you put them into a hierarchy, and it's easy for our brains to wrap around. But that's the only reason why genders are structured that way. It's because it's just how our brains make a laziness out of anatomical differences.
One church I went to explained it that the reason that men have to have the leadership roles is because men won't follow a woman's leadership. And if you allow the women to lead, the men will just get lazy and they'll just let the women do everything. And we don't want the men, not doing anything. So we have to give them all the leadership roles.
Yeah, the mental gymnastics is astounding.
Yeah, this is what happens when you try to cram all however many billions we're up to of human beings into a binary mold where everyone has to fit into one or the other and nothing in between. It's just a ridiculous exercise to begin with.
I do have. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's just a fool's errand. That's why you see this tension, because I think that as we've noted before, religion is always, or not always, but for every single person, but religion as a whole is lagging behind society. They're constantly revising the interpretation of their holy books to match secular morality with some kind of time delay. And so like these two authors that are like the conservative Christian movement now would have been raging liberals 200 years ago, and so you can constantly see this tension in what they're saying on the one hand and what they believe on the other.
I just because we talked about this just a minute ago, I bought this book used, so somebody had actually written in it, and they literally brought this up. So the question was, do you think our culture generally encourages men to grow up and take initiative as God designed? Can you think of any examples to support your answer? And they wrote in here, no, because a lot of girls do it for them.
Wow.
Well then,
that's what this lady who did this study wrote into her book. After being this far into the study, no, men are not growing up the way they ought to and take their leadership positions because the girls are taking it from them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the week as a whole?
Well, judging by how week 2 went, I am super stoked for week 3 to see how women should be.
Yeah, what is week 3? I haven't
looked.
Looked ahead.
Week 2 is snips and snails because that's what boys are made of. Week 3 is sugar and spice because that's what girls are made of.
Oh, so we get to find out what girls are, and of course the picture for the start of week 3 is a ballerina hugging a teddy bear because every girl is a ballerina. All of them.
I was not a ballerina.
But you're also not a girl, so
So I have 2 daughters, one non-binary child and one boy, and I can say that all of them went through a ballerina period. So I guess
this is actually interesting because I grew up in the theater. Like that's what I did for a long time. I took college ballet because it was part of it was an elective for my degree because I have like half a theater degree. But I took dance like all throughout childhood. But looking back, like post transition, I would be happy to do dance again and to do all that like as a man in dance. Like it's weird because like anything that I did, like no matter how stereotypically feminine, like there are men that do that, and I would be happy to do that same thing as a man, but I would not be happy to do that same thing as a woman, even though it's the exact same activity, which is part of my thought process with coming out to myself as trans. Like these are the same exact activity, but which body do I want to be in? And yeah, it's wild because I would happily go back and do ballet as a boy.
I have a question for Jordan. After this Bible study, are you now stoked to go tell your partner how you are your head and her authority and she needs to submit to you?
It's actually funny because I did not tell my wife that I was going to be doing this thing. I hadn't gotten around to telling her originally. And so I had just ordered the book and it showed up on
Oh,
her
goodness.
doorstep. And she was like, what the fuck is this?
Well, that's so interesting because, like, even with you asking the question in that way, because, you know, and I feel like I brought this up the last time, that in Matthew 20:25 through 28, Jesus says that the world defines leadership through who has the power, the authority, and the control, but that he defines leadership through service. And so, you know, like, that is where they, like, if you want to be first, you know, be last. And if you want to, you know, like, and so, like, the way, because I grew up in a very, like, progressive church, and the way that I was taught was when it says that the man is supposed to be the head of the household, it means he is meant to be the greatest servant of the home. That doesn't mean that he's supposed to be this tyrant that gets the ultimate authority and say. If anything, he should be trying to remove his wife's stress as much as possible.
I am pretty certain that the majority of evangelicals would agree with you on the theory, but would then live it practically as having the man as a tyrant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can say that when I was in an evangelical church, they did teach the other side, like, okay, you have the authority, but you also are supposed to be a servant. You're supposed to submit, you know, whatever. And I was like, cool, I'm supposed to be submissive. And then I would like do it. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, what you told me to do. Like, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
But they also tell the women that if your husband is not being a servant to you, if he's not keeping your interests in mind, you're supposed to be submissive anyway, and that your submissive attitude will bring him around.
It's a one-sided contract.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Pray more.
Yep. I heard that a lot, and every single time I was like, just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, final takeaways. We'll go around the horn and kind of say your final takeaway point for the audience. We'll start with, you know, because I usually start with the person next to me, so we'll start with Karayah and we'll go backwards.
I mean, I guess my biggest takeaway is fuck John Piper.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Godless Granny, what's
Abraham
your
Piper? He's super cool. He's part of the deconstruction community. If you guys follow him on Twitter, he's and TikTok, he's awesome. But John Piper,
they aren't kidding when they call Bible study BS.
Good. Yes, great point. Jay, what you got?
Gosh, I'm following up on that. What I'm seeing here is that the role that they assign to men that they tell women about is a lot different from what they will tell men. And this is the aspect that we see of women hearing about their men. Cliffhanger.
Yeah. Gordon, what you got?
Separate but equal doesn't work with race, and it doesn't work with gender either.
All excellent points. Yeah, I'm gonna go along with the fuck John Piper. That's a great point. And we're gonna wrap it up with some shilling of our stuff. I have links for everybody except for I don't think Jay has links, and Karayah, I don't have a link for you. So if you want to put it in or send it to me or something, or tell me where I can find it, I'll get to you in a sec because I'll get that link. But Jordan, where can everybody find you, and do you have anything going on soon?
Yeah, so Reason to Doubt, the YouTube channel. If you find a hip hop channel, that's not us. We'll keep going. It's the guy with the bow tie. And we've been covering the Shroud of Turin, which has been super popular and pretty exhausting, if I'm going to be honest. But you get to benefit without all the energy. And so part 3 of debunking the Shroud of Turin will be coming out this Thursday.
Oh, my dad totally believes the Shroud of Turin.
Well, your dad is not alone, let me tell you. Going into this, I was like, Shroud of Turin, easy, we're just in and out, just a quick, short episode, no problem.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah. No.
Jay, where can we find you?
I don't have anything for myself to share. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube too, but I don't have anything on there, not much at least. So I do not want to see most of you guys professionally because I work as a nurse. So good health to you.
Godless Granny, where can people find you? And do you have anything going on?
Yeah, my channel is Godless Granny. This week I will be putting out an interview between Sean McDowell and Dr. Marriott, I don't remember his first name offhand, on deconstruction. It might be a little bit late because I had a hearing all day today and we didn't even get through half the witnesses. It was supposed to go half of tomorrow, but it's going to go all day tomorrow. So it may be Friday before I even start editing it. I normally start editing videos on Wednesdays, and it's going to be Friday before I even start that one. And then next Tuesday, Art Against Ignorance will be on my channel to talk about music.
Awesome. Karayah, what you got?
So I am on Twitter and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with the same username here of Courageous. I think on Twitter it's like at KRAYWHISE. EART, but if you look up Courageous the way it is spelled here, then you'll also find me. I'm wanting to start my own channel. It's something I've been wanting to do since June, but I had a move over the summer across the country that has been so chaotic that feel like I'm just starting to get my bearings. So I do want to get that started in the next couple of months. So when I do, I will let everyone know.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to see that. And I'll put all of your links, if you send them to me in our group chat, I can put them all in the description. I've got them in the side chat now, but I'll add them also to the description for everybody that's here. Some things going on with this channel. So I plan on availability depending for everybody. I like to do this Bible study stream like once a month, so it's not super frequent, gives people time to work on things. But then other things that we have going on this channel, this weekend, I'm having my big top surgery fundraiser stream, or at least one of them. We'll see how much we can raise this weekend. We might do some more weekends if we still got a ways to go. But it's going to start on Friday night. We have trivia on Twitch at Student Dr. Ben, all one word. You can find me on Twitch. We're going to be doing a Jackbox game night on Friday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're watching Truth Wanted that evening, you can come over right after that. We'll be going live doing Jackbox. And then Saturday, Medical Myths is going to be earlier in the evening or earlier in the day, because normally we would go at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We are going at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time with Forrest Valkai talking about creationism in schools, specifically a proposal written by Answers in Genesis talking about a biblically integrated anatomy class. So we're going to address that.
How does that even make sense?
You'll find out. There's a whole it's a published proposal that we're going to sift through, and there's a lot going on with that. But that's on Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube, so you'll be here for that. After that, we're going to be going over to Transatlantic call-in show for a special guest that afternoon, whose availability was on Saturday, so that's why they're taking the afternoon. So we'll go over to Transatlantic after that, and then after Transatlantic, I will be on Twitch playing Civilization 6 and cosplaying as somebody in the community. So come hang out for all of that. Oh, and on Sunday, we have Dungeons and Dragons on Nat One Heroes on Twitch. So it's a fun weekend full of fundraisery things. There's a whole schedule on Twitter that I've been sending around, so you'll be able to find that. But that's all of the events. Anybody else got anything that you're thinking of off the top of your head right now that we missed? Nope. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and I'll add all of these links to the description, and we'll see you all on Friday, hopefully. Bye, everybody.
Bye.